What's up, y'all, and welcome back to Found Bytes, a game review series. My name is Brian, and I'll be your host. If you don't know about us, we're all about finding and testing out small, high-quality video games. This is a podcast that aims to respect your time and money as a gamer and a consumer by sifting through storefronts and sales to find those gems that may be worth your precious resources. But enough about the show. Let's get into our next game. Ball Pit is the game for this week's episode. Ball Pit, or Ball X Pit, I don't know how people are referring to it, but I think it's just Ball Pit, is a brick-breaking, base-building, survival roguelite game that is developed by Kenny Sun and published by Devolver Digital, and it was released in October of 2025. The game is available on Mac, PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, Switch, and Switch 2. And this is, very true to the name, roguelite. So you're going to be experiencing going on runs and the actual levels when you're in them. It's a combination of like Space Invaders or Arkanoids with a brick-breaking feel, but enemies are coming down towards you. And you're looking to go in, beat the level, or potentially die. And so it's go as long as you can. So it reminds us a lot of games we've talked about on the podcast before, like Dicey Dungeons or Pirates Outlaws. In the run, you're trying to upgrade, max out, and then cross that with outside of levels. Depending on how you do, you're unlocking characters. You're building up this sort of hub world with upgrades that'll better your future runs. So definitely think games like Balatro, Shogun Showdown, Vampire Survivors. There's a lot of comparison with Vampire Survivors. But this is pretty unique in terms of the roguelites that we've seen. The game released with an MSRP of $14.99. And runtime, these are impossible to judge with how long, but one run will be about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how long it takes you to kill the boss. In terms of like how much time to beat this game or get everything, I mean, you could play this game endlessly. A friend of mine is running through it, unlocking all the characters. I'd say could probably do everything in maybe 50 hours or probably less. Some people have done it for less. The game has a physical release, and it was released at all retails, I believe. So you can get it at like Target or Amazon or Best Buy or GameStop. And that is a $30 physical release. In the physical release, it also has 6 cards and a poster, so some cool stuff there. I got it on PS5. It was on sale, I think, right around the Game Awards. I got it for $12. And I've probably put in close to 20 hours. I think I've unlocked maybe 8 or 9 characters. I think there's like at least 15 maybe or even more. So I've definitely put in a good chunk of time, sometimes sitting at the TV, sometimes just playing a run or two in bed. It's great for that. The game was developed by Kenny Sun, so one-person team, really cool. I checked out their website. It seems like this was their first major release, or at least the one that took off. He has a lot of other games on there that are sort of smaller, some are Steam only or mobile only or Steam and Switch. So if you want to check those out, look up Kenny Sun. But I had really heard about this game because everybody was talking about it. On Sacred Symbols, I think on Kind of Funny, I'm sure they were playing it. But this was actually nominated for, I believe, Game of the Year at the Game Awards. But this was pretty popular. Everybody was talking about it. So I had to give it a shot. right, let's talk gameplay for Ball Pit. So this is a roguelite, so similar roguelite structure. So you're going to go in level and do a run, which will mean get as far as you can or beat the level. And then along the way, you're collecting things and inevitably unlocking certain things in the hub. And then you're taking those things back to the hub in between levels. You're managing what you have. You're maybe looking at the currencies you have to try and build things, because there's base building and you can upgrade your base, the things that you build, and you can expand out. So there's a whole lot there. And just, the idea of permanence. So it is a roguelite. So in the run, there are a lot of things that you collect that are permanent. A lot of the currency, but the upgrade you do to like your character or their equipment or things you pick up along the way for the run, they will all disappear. So let's talk pacing. Games like this are interesting. I feel like this is a play your own way type of game. So again, there is this cycle with these roguelites of sort of endless do a run, one more run, just throw yourself in there, sort of the gameplay feedback of just getting as far as you can, beating a level. But there's a lot more underlying here, like playing to unlock things, sort of this meta system, and we'll talk about the hub eventually, but also like strategies and quote-unquote builds. I mean, people are talking with a lot of that language, like min-maxing the different pre-buffs you can have from your hub world, the things you unlock, depending on the different characters that you're using. So there's a lot of depth here. And what's nice is that it starts very simple, especially with the tutorials. The game starts very simple. Anytime it introduces something new, there's a little screen, and it's very, cautious of not trying to talk too much or take too much of your time. But there's also like a glossary or something, or an encyclopedia anytime you want to look back at things. And then as you try to dig more and unlock more, it will sort of funnel outward and get a little more complex. And even when you beat levels, you can actually try them on like a more challenging mode. So there is level difficulty, but I don't think that expands like throughout the whole game. It's not like at the beginning you choose the difficulty level. But what's nice is you don't need to really dig that deep or participate in all the complexity to really get a lot out of this game. And let's talk progression in the game, just in the larger sense. So we understand this cycle, this idea, you're jumping into a run, you're playing a level. Within the level, there's a lot of things that you can collect. You're sort of collecting blueprints at times that can allow you to progress in the larger sense of the game. And these blueprints are going to be for building different buildings at your hub world. If you beat the level, this can progress towards either unlocking new characters, unlocking the next level. And then so each character that you unlock is going to kind of have a shot to play each level, and the game will track if you have beaten it with, this character or this character. And then the way that you inevitably progress and get new levels is, I believe you have to win with 2 different characters on a level, or it could be the same level, or if you have multiple in access. I'm not quite sure about the specifics, but I know you have to get like 2 gears. And I forget the context of when you get a gear, but it is involving you beating a level with a character. And so that's really sort of the major cycle of how to progress through the game, how to dig deeper in the complexity, that on rinse and repeat, gaining resources, gaining currency, being able to build things, which allow your characters to progress. And as you beat a level, your character will also get XP. So your character will have like different starting stats if you level them up by keep doing them on different runs. And then beyond that, sort of the things that I would deem optional, characters that you unlock are linked to the hub world and upgrading your base and base building. But in general, how you upgrade your base, how you expand the layout, how you put certain things next to each other, a lot of that I would deem as optional, and is interesting once you discover like that, I can actually do this and this will, make a big difference. So you're going to upgrade your base by using your resources to build different buildings that you got blueprints of, expand out, farm resources, and then you can build buildings that will like increase buffs for your next run, depending on the type of things that you get in the run and how you want to sort of interact with them. So let's talk about when you're in a run and just sort of the basics. So it is kind of like a Space Invaders or Tetris setup, right? You have things at the top slowly inching their way down, and these are going to be enemies, and they're going to spawn at the top and slowly, just bit by bit, make their way down, and they will spawn in lines. So like a line all the way across. It's not always going to be an enemy all the way across. There might be gaps at some points. But basically, you're going to have to shoot projectiles to kill them so that they don't get close enough to hurt you. And then your character is kind of at the bottom. And with your character, you can move around. You can aim and you can shoot. Moving is interesting because if we're talking like Space Invaders or something like that, like your character doesn't just stay at the bottom. You can actually move up a bit and around. You can actually walk around enemies. Your character moves at one speed typically, but that's something that you can upgrade within the level. The aiming is just the right joystick, point it whichever way you want, and you'll see like a little trajectory telling you where it is. And then the shoot is interesting because you can hold a button to shoot when you want to, or you can toggle on like an auto shoot. I prefer to do the toggle on the auto shoot because then you don't have to worry about, holding your finger down on a specific button, or if you let go of it, you're not shooting. It's just something that you can allow to sort of happen passively in the background, which kind of draws a parallel to Vampire Survivors if you played that, because in Vampire Survivors, you're really just moving around and all of your attacks are automatic. So it can be reminiscent of that. And your projectiles will shoot at a specific rate, but that is something that you can upgrade within a run. I feel like I'm going to be saying that a lot. Shooting. So at the beginning, you will start with a certain number of balls that you're shooting. These can have more added. You can upgrade it as you go through the level. But it's kind of going to be like pinball or like a brick breaker. And what that means is you're going to aim the trajectory of it, and it's going to bounce off of anything. It can bounce off of the walls, it can bounce off of the enemies, and it's going to bounce a lot. Now, just to give you a visual, it's kind of like the middle of the screen is this rectangle that's almost like a treadmill coming towards you, but there's a wall on either side and at the back. It's kind of like you're in an enclosed rectangle, so you can only imagine that the balls are really going to bounce anytime they hit anything. Anytime they hit an enemy, they will do damage to it. Now, what's interesting is there are a lot of games that do brick breaker stuff. My wife plays a game on her phone that has different balls with numbers on it, and they have to get hit by a ball a certain number of times. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but there is a certain cadence or shelf life to how long the ball will bounce around before it inevitably is just going to fall back down gravitationally or whatever. The balls in this game have a pretty high shelf life before they automatically come falling back. There are going to be some specific cases where they come back more quickly, but for the most part, like if you can trap them somewhere, they are going to bounce a lot. And so, not to really get too heavy into strategy, but the idea of balls kind of getting stuck or trapped somewhere and just like bouncing back and forth is going to be really good for doing damage to enemies without worrying about, getting them back and then aiming them again. So one thing that I tend to do, at least early on, before enemies spawn in, like the spaces where they're going to spawn in will start to get darker and then they'll sort of pop in. So in the beginning, there's no enemies there. If you wind up shooting the balls that you have at the back wall, some of them will get trapped between the back wall and the enemies and then just ping pong back and forth and do a lot of damage and kill them quickly. So that's just a minor example of something that can happen. But basically the idea is that these balls are going to bounce, and if you can keep them bouncing and around enemies, they're going to keep doing damage. Also, things to keep in mind. Angles, the trajectory of the aim. Sometimes you might need to access certain enemies, or sometimes we'll talk about enemies, but sometimes they're going to be weirdly shaped where you might have to use angles to access them and hit them with balls, and even get the balls to a place where they are chaining around and trapped in a little loop and bouncing and hitting enemies. But there are a lot of strategies. I will say in general, and this may be for people who start playing, you'll quickly find that shooting balls right at one enemy is probably not efficient. Like right at an enemy in front of you, there are more efficient ways to get you doing damage to multiple enemies very quickly. Now, ball retrieval, this is also something very interesting. So you have a limited number of balls, which can increase throughout the level, but if you are shooting all the balls and they happen to all get trapped somewhere, you will not be able to fire anymore. Your character will just sit there and wait for them to escape and come back down. And inevitably, like I said, with the shelf life, they will fall back down to the bottom. Now, you don't need to be where they hit the bottom, because what will happen is once they hit the bottom of the screen, they will sort of gather in the center and then just shoot right to you. But a better way, or a more efficient way is if they're actually starting to come back down and you stand in their trajectory, you will catch them and then immediately be able to shoot them again. So it can be more efficient to try and move your character and maneuver so that you're catching balls, so you're not waiting for them to hit all the way at the bottom and then eventually come back to you. So this is where being able to move as your character and traverse up and around, aiming your angles and trying to hit enemies and maybe catch all the balls on the other side, you can really maximize sort of acute damage and quick retrieval, which can be very helpful at quickly killing enemies. Now, as you're moving around, you're also going to be collecting things. So as you damage enemies and kill them, they will leave a lot of drops sort of just scattered on the floor. The most common thing you're going to see are these gems, and these can be different colors. They'll be like yellow or blue, but they're like glowing, a little bit shiny. But all you have to do is walk over these to pick these up. These are going to be part of your experience meter within the level. So once you collect enough gems, you're going to get a level up screen. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But there are going to be a lot of gems, so you're going to want to constantly move around and collect these. You're also occasionally going to see coins. You want to pick these up too. These are going to be the currency that you use mostly at the hub. This will be a permanent currency. So picking these up, it's good because once you get back to the hub, you'll be able to use coins if you have them. There will be resources. There aren't that many different resources in the game. There's like wood or wheat or stone. So if you happen to see, it's a little more rare to see these in a level, but if you happen to see them, just walk over them. Your character will pick them up and you'll be able to use them much like the coins in the hub to craft or build things. You'll also see these fusion upgrade things. They're like these multicolored, like circling things that are just sitting there. It's often when you beat like a bigger enemy, these will drop. These are really cool because this is going to open up like a different screen, like an upgrading screen that can potentially upgrade any special balls that you have or any passive items that you have. You'll also find blueprints, and these are going to be big for being able to build structures at your hub. So when you go into the level select screen, it'll actually tell you how many blueprints are left to collect in that level. So it might take you a couple of runs just to find them, but these are obviously going to be permanent. You'll also sometimes see potions that are dropped. These are just going to give you back health, which is nice. There's a health meter in the bottom left. It's just like a giant circle that's filled with like a red liquid, and as you get hit, it goes down. So most of these things that you're collecting are going to be permanent, except for things like the gems and the fusion items or the potions that are helping you like right now in the level. So let's talk about leveling up. So you're collecting a lot of gems. When the level up screen comes up, this is going to be very reminiscent of Vampire Survivors if you've played that. So when you get enough XP, you'll just hit an automatic level up screen, and then you get to choose some options. It's also very similar to Balatro, like in between rounds, like when you're at the shop, because when you hit the level up screen, you're going to see 3 options where you can collect one of the things, and these are going to be special items that will get added to your repertoire. And these items can either be a special ball that you can now throw or some kind of passive feature. And regardless of which you choose, as you keep leveling up throughout the game, you can fit up to 8 different ones of these in your, inventory. Now, it is random what pops up in the 3 options. You can sort of, re-roll if you want by spending like coins or something. Sometimes, if you already have a special item, like a passive item or a special ball, one of the options will be to level one of your things up. Leveling up is interesting because it starts simple. Like you start out with nothing in the level, and so you might want to pick just the best option or the thing that sounds good. But then things get increasingly complex. Some of these will do status. So like there's like a poison ball, there's like a frost ball that has a chance to freeze enemies and stop them from moving. There's like a vampire ball that has a chance to give you health back whenever it hits something. There's these laser balls that when they hit something, it's either a horizontal or a vertical laser. It'll like hit the enemy and then damage all of the enemies in the same row or the same column. Some of them are AoE effects, like there's a lightning ball, there's an earthquake ball that'll like hit all enemies around the enemy that got hit. But then there are also passive things, like things that aren't specific balls that you're shooting out. There's like, a passive that's like anytime you hit an enemy from the left side, like you'll get a couple extra of the baby balls or whatever that are added to sort of your pack or whatever. One of my favorites is you can heal past your max health. So that's great if you have like the vampire ball or if you're picking up potions and your health is full, like you can keep getting health. There are a ton of things like that that also interact with the environment. All of a sudden, that's going to dictate how you're aiming, whether you're going to aim right for a wall. Some are like special balls that, shoot through enemies that go all the way to the back wall. So like, again, the way that you now are playing is going to be dictated by the special items or passives that you have. In real time, a lot of this is just getting thrown to you and you're like, okay, I got to try to do it this way, or, think about it this way, or aim this way. So it can be really kinetic and get complex very quickly. We talked about being able to level up these items. So any item, whether it's a special ball or a passive, can be leveled up to level 3. If you pick up the fusion upgrade thing, the swirly thing, all of a sudden there are 3 options for you. Now, depending on what you have and what level everything is, you might only have one option. So the main option that you get is fission. And what that'll do is anywhere from 1 to 5 items that you might have will all go up 1 level. It does this kind of randomly. It's like an RNG, like how many of your things it will level up. But definitely helpful because when you level up special balls or passives, like it ups their damage, it ups their benefits. Fusion is something that you'll see when your special balls are of a certain level. They can potentially be fused together. Basically, it's just combining them into one item with their effects. As well as evolution. I don't quite know the difference. I think evolution makes something like completely brand new that's like a bit more high level, whereas fusion just sort of adds the effects of the 2 balls. Either way, fusion and evolution, when you do either of these, it will take 2 of your special balls and turn them into 1, opening up a space for then the next time you level up, if you want to get something new to put in your space of 8 things in your inventory, you can do that. All right, let's talk enemies in the game. So these are very simply designed. Basically, all enemies are sitting in boxes, and it's the boxes that are drifting down. So it's not like enemies are really moving. Like, they're going to look different, but they're all in sort of, it's almost like they're all in like these mine carts that are just slowly marching down. And so some of them will take up like a single square, and this kind of makes it feel like the level is in a grid, but not every enemy is going to take up the same amount of space. Some of them will take up 2 spaces, and they might be 2 across or 2 vertical. Some of them might form like right angles. Like, this is really where it starts to look like Tetris pieces, which is interesting because everything we've talked about with like aiming your balls and shooting them and them getting like trapped or caught, you might have enemies that are shaped really strangely, but if you angle your shot, you can wind up like hitting them in a row a couple times, or really get, the bouncing and the angles, like getting certain enemies hit multiple times in a row. The shape of things really kind of lends itself to the gameplay. But again, all enemies are moving down at the same speed. Sometimes in a level, there'll be like mini bosses or halfway bosses, and you'll kind of hear it in the music because it'll kind of silence for a second. And also, like, not a lot of enemies will be on the screen anymore. Like, there'll be like a delay, and then all of a sudden this bigger dude comes in. These are interesting because sometimes the shape of their box is angled, sometimes it's like a diamond, sometimes it's a crazy shape, which can make things complex because the angle that you're bouncing things all of a sudden has now been complicated. These are going to be tougher. They're definitely going to have more HP, and you need to focus on killing them because if they get down to the bottom, they're going to do a lot of damage to you. And then just some other advanced things that you'll see in some of the further levels. Like, you'll see enemies that have shields, like, only on one side of them. So, like, you can't hit them. Like, if an enemy has a shield in the front, you're going to have to find a way to bounce and hit him on the right side or the left side. Enemies will be in like tiered layers. So they might be a guy who's in a box, but he is on the 3rd tier of his box. So you have to kill the 1st tier, the 2nd tier, and then kill him in the 3rd tier. Enemies can damage you. We've talked about that. Some of them will use projectiles. A lot of these are super slow and really few and far between. Certainly in the first level, I don't think there's that many. But these you need to be watching out for because, again, you are moving. So now all of a sudden you're thinking about, oh, I want to move here so I can angle this shot and get access to killing these enemies. But now I've got projectiles. So like it really does create sort of a fluidity to you and what you need to pay attention to. Again, not that unlike Vampire Survivors. Like you're constantly looking at where you need to go so you don't trip on anything or you can see the path clearing. We talked about how you're able to walk around enemies. You don't want to get too close because if you get too close and you stay there, remember the enemies are moving down. If you see an exclamation point above an enemy, that means they're about to attack you which is kind of like a melee bump. And if they do that, they'll do damage to you. And they will sort of kill themselves. So it's kind of like a suicide thing, like a bee. The only ones that this won't happen to are like the mini bosses, because they'll just keep staying there and keep attacking you. This will also happen if enemies get to the bottom of the screen, regardless of where you are. So obviously, if you have enemies that are getting pretty low, like you'll be down there to try and kill them. But even if you're not there, if they reach the bottom of the screen, they're going to attack you, and most of them will do the suicide attack. But that's sort of like the Tetris jam up aspect of it, or like the Space Invaders, where like if everything gets to the bottom of the screen, all of a sudden you're just going to get attacked over and over and over again, and then your health will go down, and then you'll die. And then every level will have a final boss. What's nice is like once you get to the final boss, sort of like the treadmill aspect doesn't really affect you as much, because the final boss will kind of just stay in place. Final boss has a lot of health. Typically, they'll have a weak spot that you need to find a way to get your balls to hit. Some of the bosses will have like multiple pieces. Sometimes they'll act as shields. Sometimes they'll act as like projectiles. So there's a lot of moving parts with the bosses, and really different. All of them are different from each other and unique. But again, it's going to inspire some maneuvering on your part. So you're going to have to constantly be moving, maybe even what feels like a little platforming, although you're not like jumping or anything. But basically you're avoiding attacks and hazards, and you're trying to, get your balls to hit the weak spot of the boss. A lot of bosses will spawn more enemies. These will potentially come down at you, so you do have to be aware of sort of that conveyor belt thing there. And ultimately, the goal with the level is to win. So if you win, you get like a lot of currency, some resources potentially. And if it's your first time killing a certain boss with a character, you will probably get a gear, which will contribute towards unlocking future levels. And then once you beat a level, you'll go back to the hub. And this is kind of like a mini Stardew Valley type thing, like a sim almost. You're needing to build your town or village. And you do that by looking at the space that you have. It's kind of like a grid that has different land plots, and you need to buy them to open them up so that you can have space to build things. And this is where collecting the blueprints in the level will come in handy. These blueprints allow you to build specific buildings or land functions. So some of the land functions might be like wheat fields, forests, rocks, but then also a lot of different types of buildings. Most of these, if you try to build them, take up a semi-standard amount of space. Like you unlock, a giant rectangle, and most things that you're trying to build take up like a single square. Some of the rocks are smaller, but like there is a standardized sort of space element to it. But once you build things, you can move them around and arrange them however you want, almost like a little bit of dark cloud action. And things can overlap more than you think. Like you can really squeeze things into the space that you have. Now, the land functions like the wheat field, the forest, the rocks, these need to be harvested in order to get the resources for them. So the wheat, the wood, the stone, any buildings that you have that you've built will need to be activated in order to function. And what we mean by function is some of these buildings will provide those sort of stat buffs or increase your certain stat scaling at the start of a run, as well as if you get a new character. So it's interesting because you can unlock a new character, but you first, at least for most of them, unlock their building, and then so you have to put their building down, and then you have to activate it in order to activate that character. Anything that you build can be upgraded with resources to increase the production that it gives, or the efficiency, or the buff that it provides when it's activated. But everything needs to be harvested. So we talked about that with the different land functions. So at a certain point in between levels, you can quote unquote harvest once. Now, what harvesting means, basically all the characters that you have, they're sort of present in this hub world, like walking around like little sprites. When you click harvest, they'll all line up, and then you have an aim and a trajectory, and then you have to fire them, and you'll fire them all at once, and they'll like kind of run out in succession. And what they have to do is they have to hit things or bounce off of things. And this is how fields are harvested. This is how buildings are activated. So basically it's like a little bit of a meta game. Like you were in a level and you were doing this whole like pinball sort of brick breaking thing. And then in the hub, you're doing the same thing in order to activate the things that you've built. So buildings need to be hit a certain number of times before they're activated, or if they're upgraded, you need to hit them again a certain number of times to allow that upgrade to go through. You need to run into a wheat field to harvest the wheat, hit the forest, all of that stuff. So it's really interesting and something that caught me off guard because, once again, where you place certain things and what characters will bounce off of versus walk through if they've hit it is going to be a strategy thing. And then so you just spent all that time going through the level and trying to figure out angles and bouncing mechanics, and now all of a sudden in the hub world you're kind of arranging it the same way, which is super interesting. And then finally, let's just talk accessibility in general. So again, just from the get-go, you're choosing kind of the level of depth and complexity that you want to give to this game. I just talked about how the hub world, you can really get into the meta aspect of, positioning things in certain ways to maximize efficiency of allowing your characters to harvest things. You can rebeat levels, which is nice, at higher difficulties. And basically that means that everything moves a little bit faster. So once you beat a level with a character, you can beat it on like the advanced difficulty. I haven't done that yet. There might be, multiple levels of difficulty, but I think that's a nice added touch for people that want to, really maximize challenge. The tutorial pacing is just top notch. And there's an encyclopedia that you can access at any time. So if it's like a specific special ball and how it works, just to maybe go in and strategize and try to think like, oh, for this run, I want to use this character and try to find this kind of ball and use this passive. So you can really, get into the weeds with that. There are options to actually slow down the game speed, which might be helpful for some people. You can manualize leveling up so it doesn't just pop up automatically. I haven't really messed around with too many of those options, but there are a fair amount of accessibility options. And just the idea that dying happens. I mean, the goal is to beat a level, but if you don't and you die, you still get a lot of the resources and you get the character XP to level them up so that next time you go through a run with them, they start out with a little better stats. So even if you're feeling like the game is too tough, it's meant to onboard you in a way that you're getting better even though you're not dying. So there is progression there. Let's talk about the vibe of Ball Pit, and let's start with the visuals. So the game is pixelated, but there's a 3D element to it. So your characters, your enemies, these are all basically just sprites, but the buildings in the hub world and your base, they all have sort of this outline or this dark shadowing at times that add dimension. It gives it a vaguely cartoonish feel to it. It almost feels a little bit like games like The Walking Dead or the other Telltale games early on, or like Borderlands, or even like a level 5 style like Dark Cloud 2 and Rogue Galaxy, sort of this outline around but it's only around the buildings, it's not around the sprite. So it's an interesting dimension that it adds, because I wouldn't say that this game is just completely pixelated. I think it picks and chooses where it is, but the elements that are three-dimensional really add sort of that extra level of visuals. Colors, I would say mostly dark and drab, which makes sense. I mean, you're going down into a pit. It seems like, maybe you're in a mining place, or you're in a tomb, or you're underground. The base itself, when you're out in the hub world, it does have an autumnal feel to it, like an orange brush in all of the plots that you haven't bought yet. But the dirt that you're building things on is brown. Everything has very sort of bleak or dark or drab tint to it with the color options. But there are flares in the things that you build. Some of the roofs are a blue, or the wheat fields pop a little bit of yellow. The levels are definitely environmentally centered. So there is a biome. But there's the level that's the crypt, the level that's the desert, the level that's like the frozen Iceland and everything has like a blue tint. And then the enemies and the colors in those different levels do match the theme. Now, when you're in the level, like the floor and the walls, nothing's really popping here, and I think that's on purpose, which is a really good idea, because what you're really focused on are the different indicators or the things that need to catch your eye. So, for example, ball movement. Like, you need to track where the balls are and be able to pick them up quickly. Most of the little ones are white, but the special ones are, a lot of different colors. Also, being able to, orient yourself to find your aim of trajectory, like that's never a problem. As well as like when you're trying to see balls bouncing back, trying to move your character to get in the right position to catch balls. What's also really nice is that when you hit enemies, their entire body flashes white. So if they get hit, you see it. And it happens in succession if they keep getting hit. So like that visual feedback is super important. And I love the way the game does that, because it's really communicating with you. So like, oh, I'm really killing this guy over here. So I got to get ready, because as soon as these balls come back down, I'm going to try to shoot them in the other direction and kill these other guys over there. So the indicators are really good. Also, the things you pick up, the collectibles, the currency, the resources, they definitely pop out. The gems are super bright, so you won't miss them. In terms of audio, really like the music. I think it's good. I think it's infectious. There's nothing really that stands out with like heart or emotion, but a lot of just catchy loops that I feel really back the environmental setting, depending on which, biome or whatever you're in. And even when you come back to the hub, like, I talked about visually, it looks very autumnal. I think the music actually really contributes to that too. It's sounding like a calm forest. And then the sound effects are very helpful. Anytime you hit something, you're getting sound effects, like you're hearing that audio feedback. Anytime you pick up something, gems, coins, like all of that is to really alleviate your mind so that you don't have to focus too much on any task that you're doing, so that you can multitask. But overall, it gives the feel of a pinball machine, right? The sounds, the lights, which is kind of the vibe that I think the game is going for, despite, the roots in Arkanoid and Space Invaders, stuff like that. It really feels like, flashing lights and cool stuff and sounds. So you're really getting that full vibe. And then finally, in terms of setting and themes, there's some story here. It starts out as like, oh, you're this older civilization called Babylon. It's supposed to be a play on Babylon. You don't have like advanced technology, like you're using wood and stone and wheat, like you're tilling the wheat fields and all that stuff and cutting down forests. So it is very, I guess I'll say, sort of analog, like it's not very digital in terms of what they can do. The characters, the levels that you're in, the enemies, there's some supernatural aspect to it that's kind of floating around, like some of the powers or elements that are around. I don't know the source of anything. It's not really explained. But you have like undead, you have monsters, you have, bugs, infestations. The idea of there being a pit, it's like this meteor came down and wrecked this town or this city that was Babylon. Some kind of cross between supernatural, celestial, maybe. With all of that, the game is very simple, very humble, silly at times. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Like when you have the characters bouncing around in the hub world, like they're just like making, silly sounds and just real matter-of-factly with the sound effects, I feel. So it keeps the game very light, which I think is really helpful. All right, let's wrap up the conversation about Ball Pit. This is a great game. I mean, don't take my word. It was a nominee for Game of the Year. It didn't wind up winning, but I mean, we've seen multiple times, like Balatro did the same thing. Like, these smaller games, these roguelite games that really have a great feedback loop. It's a short list of top tier games, but Dicey Dungeons, Shogun Showdown. These are games that I think are really good, and they're roguelites, but a lot of people find them very infectious in their gameplay loops. On the surface, a game like this seems very simple. I've talked about Space Invaders, Arkanoids, those comparisons, but honestly, it has near endless replayability. You can jump in, jump out, do a run in 15 minutes, easy. I know I talked a lot about some of the gameplay, but there's a lot of things I didn't get to with the different characters and their abilities, how they differ, how they shoot balls differently, how different ones can open themselves up to different bounce strategies, the synergy with the upgrades and the character abilities, the special balls. Like, there's so much depth, and the game can get very complex, but not overwhelming. It just has a lot in it if you want to explore and maximize, do scaling buffs, really just get ready for a run instead of just jumping right in. It's really up to you how you want to do it. In terms of value, $15. I mean, just a great price, an absolute great price. It's great for full price. Any sale is a steal. I got it for a couple bucks off. There's so much value here. And just as a comparison, like, I know these games, these roguelites are very like pick up and play and put down, but like games like this, you can put it down for a couple weeks and pick it back up and just dive right in. I have friends that are still playing Balatro, put it down for a little bit, got back into it, and then it became their number one game again. For me, roguelites, they're not really my go-to, but if the game has an infectious game loop, it's for everyone. And games like this, I just feel like anybody could jump in and find a way, even if it's too challenging, it's too fast, like you can adjust things, you can make it your own. I really feel like it has a great gameplay loop. So if you're somebody, even who's new to the genre, roguelites, I think you could really get in. But even old schoolers, people who used to play old games like Space Invaders and Arkanoid, like, you're going to find this to be super refreshing. So I really highly recommend this game to anyone and everyone. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode to see what new game we found for you.